about the complex 4 of the electron transport chain. Complex 4 is also known as cytochrome oxidase. As the electron transport chain, the complexes are arranged in order. As the complex 1, then complex 2, complex 3, and complex 4. As in the electron transport chain, there is the transfer of electrons from the NADH to the complex 1, then to the complex 3, and then to the complex 4. And FADH2 from the complex 2 to the complex 3, and then to the complex 4. There is a series of reactions. Electrons are transported through these complexes in an order of the increasing redox potential. So finally, the electrons are taken up by the oxygen that is attached to the complex 4. Right? So this oxygen is attached to the complex 4 until it accepts the electron and convert it into the water. Okay, so in this lecture we are going to talk about the only complex 4, right? So complex 4 takes up the electrons by the cytochrome C. That's why it is also known as cytochrome C oxidase, right? Because this complex 4 is involved in the oxidation of the cytochrome. This cytochrome is reduced, it will get oxidized, and in turn this complex 4 will transfer the electrons, and as a result, at the end of this transfer of electrons, the oxygen will get reduced, right? The oxygen will get reduced and the cytochrome C will get oxidized, right? So these electrons will be taken up by the complex 4, and then from the complex 4, these electrons will be taken up by the oxygen, and finally the oxygen will take up the protons present inside the matrix and form the water molecule. Okay, so let's see in the detail that complex 4 is also known as cytochrome oxidase. Complex 4 is known as cytochrome oxidase because it's going to cause the oxidation of the cytochrome, right? The cytochrome, it will give its electron to the complex 4, and from the complex 4, the electrons will be passed and taken up by the oxygen. Okay, so oxygen will take up the electron from the complex 4 and hydrogen ions present inside the matrix and will form the water molecule. And as a result, at the transfer of these electrons, the energy is generated and the energy is used to pump the protons from the mitochondrial matrix into the intermembrane space. So these protons will be collected into the intermembrane space and will build a hydrogen ion gradient or the chemiosmosis, and that are later used in the process or for the synthesis of the ATP. Okay, so this is the overall view that how the cytochrome C, it will transfer its electron to this complex 4, and then from the complex 4 it will be taken up by this oxygen, and this oxygen will take the hydrogen from the mitochondrial matrix and will form the water molecule. And as a result, the energy release will transfer these protons from the inside of the mitochondrial matrix to the intermembrane space, and these protons will be collected into the intermembrane space, and as a result, the uh, proton gradient will be developed, the hydrogen ion gradient will be developed. This is the overall reaction for this complex 4, that the end product of this complex 4 is the water molecule, or you can say that because this complex 4 is the terminal component of the electron transport chain, as the electron transport chain consists of 4 complexes, the complex 1, complex 2, complex 3, and complex 4. So complex 4 is the final or the terminal complex for the electron transport chain. So at this, the complex 4 oxygen is present. The oxygen is abundantly present inside the environment. It is taken up by the human body and is present inside the cell in aerobic conditions. This oxygen is attached to the complex 4. So what will it will do? It will take up the electrons, right? So it will take up the electrons and the protons and will form the water molecule. So the significance of this oxygen that it is attached to the complex 4 until it accepts the electron, that when it accepts the 1 electron or 2 electron, it can be present in the free radical form, hydrogen peroxide form. Okay, so this process prevents this oxygen to become the free radical form, to become the hydroxyl free radicals, to become the hydrogen peroxide in order to prevent the damage of the cellular components, right? So finally, the final end product of the electron transport chain is the formation of the water molecule. Okay, so let's see about the structural organization of this complex 4. The main component of the complex 4 is that it contains the two copper centers. Okay, let's have now, don't look at the transfer of electrons. Now, first of all, we are looking at the main structural components of this complex core. So this complex core consists of two copper centers. Okay, it has two copper centers and two iron centers. Okay, so these copper centers are also known as copper A and copper B, and these iron centers are basically the cytochromes. Okay, so it will be known as cytochrome. This will be known as cytochrome A, and this will be known as cytochrome A3. So this is the main structural organization for this complex force. So this complex force contains the copper and iron centers that has the oxidation and reduction properties. As this copper, it has it has lost its electron, so it's in the form of cuprous ion, right? And it will so this cuprous ion is in the it has lost his electron, sorry, it has accepted electron, so it is the reduced form. This cuprous ion, okay, so when it loses its electron, then it is in the form of cuprous ion. Same like for the iron, that's 2 plus and 3 plus. Ferrous ion reduced form, and the ferric ion is oxidized form. So the same as iron, that it exists in the ferric and ferrous form, and the copper also exists in the cuprous and cupric ion form, that it is the reduced and the oxidized form. So that's why it has these components, the structural components. So the oxidation reduction reactions occurs, that electrons are transported, and it has the tendency to become cuprous and cupric, and then ferrous and ferric. So the transport of electrons will be taken up by these oxidation reduction reactions. Okay, so so this complex 4 takes up the electron from the cytochrome C, right? So one cytochrome C takes up one electron, then two cytochrome C will take up two electrons. But these copper and iron sulfur centers also carry the one electron at one time, right? So this cytochrome C, it has carried the electron from the complex 3. Okay, it carries the electron from the complex 3, and then it transports to the complex 4, right? So this cytochrome C, it will transport electron to the complex 4, and it will get oxidized, right? Cytochrome C will get oxidized. Then it will give its electrons to the complex 4. It will be taken up by its first component, that is the copper center. Okay, that's known as copper A because it has two. These centers are same, but they are present inside this enzyme at different parts. Okay, this enzyme, this protein, these centers are present at different locations. So that's why they are named different, like copper A and copper B, right? So it will take up its electron. This copper will get reduced. Then it will transfer its electron to the cytochrome B that contains the iron center. Then it will become oxidized and will get reduced. Then it will transfer its electron to cytochrome A1, right? Then as a result, it will get reduced and will get oxidized, and then it will transfer electron to the copper B. And as it will get reduced, it will get oxidized, and then this copper B finally transports electron to the oxygen. The final acceptor of the electron is the oxygen, right? So it will accept this electron, it will be still attached to this complex until it accepts the other electron and form the water molecule. Okay, until the formation of the water molecule, it will be still attached to this complex, right? Then other electron will come to the other cytochrome C, right? It pass through this series of reactions, to the oxidation reduction reactions, to the cuprous and cupric and ferrous and ferric form, and then it will be finally accepted by the oxygen. When it will accept two electrons, and then it will accept the two protons from the inside the matrix, and finally there will be the production of the water molecule, right? So for the two electrons, there will be formation of one water molecule, and for the transfer of four electrons, there will be an exception of four protons, and there will be the formation of two molecules, two water molecules. Okay. So for the transfer of two electrons, as we are talking about the two electrons to the complex 1, 2, and 3, we were talking about two electrons, right? So when these two electrons pass through these reactions, as a result, as the electrons will be taken up by this oxygen, okay, so the transfer of, we always say that the transfer of electrons, the transport of electrons, and as a result, the energy liberated is used to transport the protons from inside the matrix to the intermembrane space. Okay, so these protons, as a result, what will happen? The two protons will be pumped by this complex 4. Okay, as from the complex 1, 4 protons were pumped. From the complex 3, 4 protons were formed. Complex 2 was not involved in the transfer of the protons, but in this case, in the complex 4, okay, there will be transfer of only 2 protons in case of transfer of 2 electrons, right? Okay, so this complex 4 consists of 2 heme groups, right? It contains the 2 heme group and 2 copper ions, right? So these 2 heme groups are named as cytochrome A and cytochrome A3. So what would be the mechanism for this fold, for the transfer of electrons, right? Like this is the complex 4. It consists of, it has the main two components, which is copper centers. It has the copper centers and the iron centers. And the copper centers are named copper A and copper B, right? And it has the cytochrome iron centers. The one is named cytochrome A and cytochrome B3. As I told you, these are the same but are present at different locations inside the enzyme. Okay, now let's talk about this cytochrome C. That's it is in the reduced form because it has carrying the electrons from the complex 3. Okay, then it will give its electrons to the complex 4. This cytochrome C is also has the iron center, right? When it will give its electron to this complex 4, it will get reduced. Sorry, it will get oxidized, right? It will become ferric form, and as a result, this copper will get reduced, right? So this copper A will get reduced and it will transport its electron, as this one cytochrome carries one electron, so the two cytochrome will carry two electrons. And the same case for these centers, that it carries one electron at one time. But then one by one it will carry the two electrons. Okay, so when these electrons are transported to cytochrome A, then it is transported to cytochrome A3 and then copper B center. And finally, the final acceptor is the oxygen. It will accept the two protons from the matrix, and finally there will be the formation of water. As a result of these transfer of electrons, what will happen with two protons? We cannot four, but two protons. In case of two transfer of two electrons, two protons will be transported from the inside the matrix to the intermembraneous space. If there are four protons, then there will be a formation of two water molecules, and there will be the transfer of four protons from the from the inner mitochondrial membrane to the intermediate space. But in this case, there are the transfer of two electrons, so that's why there will be formation of one water molecule, and there will be the transfer of two protons from the mitochondrial matrix to the intermediate space for the purpose of the development of the chemiosmosis, and that will be later used in the synthesis of the ATP. Well, the complex 4 is present inside the inner mitochondrial membrane along with the other complexes of the electron transport chain, right? So cytochromes give an electron to the complex 4, and then as a result, these two protons will be transported from the mitochondrial matrix to the intermembraneous state, right? And these electrons will be taken up by the oxygen and will be used in the formation of the water molecule. Okay. So one cytochrome, one electron is given, then other electron ठीक at a time एक electron pass होगा, right? One electron is passed through one time through these copper centers, cytochrome A, then cytochrome A3, then copper B, and then finally electrons are taken up by the oxygen, right? And the transfer of electron, two protons are transported from the complex 4 to the intermembraneous space. So the overall reaction for the complex 4 is that it takes up the electron from the cytochrome C, and the final acceptor is the oxygen. And then the final end product for this whole electron transport chain is the water molecule. But the final acceptor for the electrons that comes from the NADH and the FADH to okay, then these electrons are transported to these components, to these electron carriers, and then final acceptor is the oxygen, and and these electrons will be accepted by this oxygen, and finally the final component that is going to be reduced to oxygen and will give the formation of the water molecule, right? So from this cytochrome C, one cytochrome C carries one electron, and then other cytochrome C carry other electrons. Okay, so two electrons carried up by the oxygen for the formation of one water molecule, right? For the formation of one water molecule, and these electrons are carried by these a series of reactions, right? So when two electrons are given up by this NADH complex 1, when NADH is going to oxidize, it will give two electrons, and then these two electrons are transported through these all the components. Then how much protons are transported from the complex 1? Four protons are transported. From complex 3, 4 protons are pumped inside the intermediate space, and from complex 4, 2 protons are pumped to the intermediate protons are required for the synthesis of 1 ATP, right? So 4 and 2. So in this case, for the transfer of 2 electrons, in case of NADH, there will be the transfer of 10 protons from the mitochondrial matrix to the intermembrane space. So collectively 10 protons, so it means that it's going to give the production of 2.5 ATP. And in case of this complex 2, that FADH2 is going to oxidize, it will give transfers 2 electrons and then pass to these reactions, and these 2 electrons are taken up by this oxygen. The final acceptor is the oxygen. Then how much protons are pumped? That from the complex 2, no protons are pumped. Complex 3 transports the 4 protons, and complex 4, there is the transportation of 2 protons from the mitochondrial matrix to the intermembrane space. So 4 is it gives the synthesis of 1 ATP, and it gives the synthesis of 2 protons gives the synthesis of 0.5, that is half ATP. So in case of this FADH2 transfer of electron, in case of this the transfer of 2 electrons in the final acceptor is the oxygen, there will be the synthesis of the 1.5 ATP, right? Because the complex 2 does not transport any protons, right? And complex 1 is not involved in this case. So this is overall for the electron transport chain, that it consists of complex 1, complex 2, complex 3, and complex 4. So you have seen that how the 2 electrons are transported through a series of reactions to these components, and the final acceptor is the oxygen, and the end product is the water molecule, and how much protons are transported through each complex. And more specifically, the iron sulfur centers and the copper centers and the cytochromes are involved. And there are 3 types of cytochromes are involved: cytochrome B, cytochrome C1, cytochrome C, and cytochrome A, and cytochrome A3. Right? So these cytochromes also contains the iron centers, that iron has the ability and the tendency to get oxidized and reduced, like become ferrous and ferric form. And complex 4 also contains the copper centers, that it can also be gets reduced and oxidized. So these reactions couple between the oxidation and reduction reactions.